Hi crocheters, this is Crafty Crystal. I had someone ask me about going up straight so that you don't end up toeing in. I think a lot of the confusion happens from not knowing where your last stitch is and the difference between single and double stitches on the end, and it can get awfully confusing. Got my tongue trapped in my eye teeth this morning. I can't see what I'm saying. Anyway, let's give it a shot. Okay, because we're working on straight edges, you don't need a long swatch, so I'm going to use about 8 stitches here. And before we do that, I want to talk about the anatomy of a stitch. If you start thinking about the stitches as things that are built a particular way, it'll be a lot easier for you to understand what you're doing. The way these are built, these are single crochets, is you have the body of the ship of the stitch, which we call the shaft or the post, and you have the loop that goes around the top of it. Now this little loop here was the last loop that was on this hook. Now this loop here is going to become the top loop of the next post. So when you look at this and you see this loop, you know that belongs to the same post that you're on, okay? Now we're going to go to the next loop and make a single crochet. Okay. Now this loop here is the loop that was just on my post, and now it's the top of the next shaft. Okay? This becomes very important later, and I'll show you why. Now, here's the last shaft, and here's the loop that belongs to this shaft or this post. Now I'm going to chain 1 and turn. Okay, and here's that loop that belongs to this post. Okay, when you're going backwards and you're not going just around and around the same direction, the loop that's right in front of the post is the one that belongs to it. Okay, now for single crochets only, you go into that same loop that belongs to your post. So you're putting 2 shafts for 1 stitch. That's single crochet only. So you make another single crochet right there. Okay. And this loop here on the top is a very visible loop. It's the loop between these 2 stitches, and these 2 stitches equal 1. They go into 1 hole. Now this is only for single crochet, and I don't know why it has to be so darn complicated for single crochets. It's not the same for every other stitch. So you have your chain 1 up, and then you make your single crochet right in the same loop that belongs to your stitch. So you have 2 stitches in 1 stitch. These 2 count as 1 single crochet. This loop on top is your last stitch for the row that when you come back, okay? And the loop on top here becomes the loop for the top of the next stitch. This loop is going to become the top for the next post. See? So this loop goes for these 2 stitches. This loop goes for this one. This loop goes for this one. This loop goes for this one. See? Once you get that in your head, coming or going, you won't have a big... Sorry, didn't mean to do that. Go ahead and do these down to the back. Now this bottom row is the first turnaround on the chain. Okay. So you look down here, Here's where I came up and turned around and went in the second stitch from the hook. Okay, so what do I have on top? One stitch that goes for these two. These two equal one stitch. So we're going to go into that stitch. Okay, and we have the same number of stitches top and bottom. Chain one and turn. Now because it's single crochet, we're going to do this again. We go in the same stitch that leads to and belongs with the stitch we're on. So for single crochet only, you put 2 stitches in the same stitch in the end. The one you chained up with and the one that you went into. Okay, that's those 2 posts are 1 stitch. And this loop is the top of that stitch. Okay. So when we go back across again, we will find that little stitch waiting for us at the top of the double end. Well, it's a single crochet, but you know what I mean, 2 stitches in one. Okay. And here we are. These last 2 posts equal 1 stitch. They equal your single crochet, and the little loop on top of it is where you put your last stitch at. See? If you count your stitches, you count these 2 as 1 stitch. You count these 2 as 1 stitch. See? How many times did I go back and forth here? We should have. We start out with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And over here, these 2 count as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? Did I put my head in the way? I'm not looking at the monitor when I'm looking at my work. Now we're going to do a double. So we're going to chain 2. Okay. Now we have 1 chain, 2 chain, and the loop in our hook is going to belong to the next stitch. So we're going to wrap, go into the next stitch, come up, wrap, go through 2 of these loops, wrap, go through 2 of these loops. If you're looking at a printed pattern, that wrap is YO for yarn over. Okay? Now we're going to go ahead down here. Now because we didn't go back into itself, because we went to the next stitch, remember this first loop belongs to this post. This first loop belongs to this post. It's part of it. So you don't go back into there for anything except the single crochet. Go into the next stitch. So this loop here belongs to this second stitch. So the loop right behind it, this one here, which is your second stitch up, your second chain, this is the one you'll go into for your last one. Okay? So wrap, go into the stitch. We'll just get down here to the end of the doubles or the end of the singles. Now what you have to do, because you have lots of patterns where you use a pattern stitch and then go to a single crochet to go back in the other direction, be aware of what stitch you're going into at the end so you don't get confused. This is a double crochet. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 so far. And it looks like we have 2 shafts down here. But these are single crochet. The 2 single crochets come out of the same hole. This is 1 stitch. This little loop on top is the last stitch of the row. So we do our double into it. Okay, now chain 2 and turn. See? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stitches, just like we started with. Now we're going to go back, and again we chain 2. So this second chain here, chain 1, chain 2. See the way they curve inward like that? That's the first one. And get it. The first one curves in like that. That's your first chain. And there's the back loop for it. And there's your second chain. And there's the back hump for it. Okay? The second chain is where you're going to be coming when you come back. Okay? Just like on the other end. Oh, and one little thing for you new crocheters. When you take your hook off the loop and you don't know which way it goes back in, pull you're using the thread you're using a little bit, and the part that moves, that's the side that goes towards you. You'll never get your stuff turned around if you remember that. Okay, now we're going to wrap and go back the other way. We didn't do 2 in the first one. We just did 1, came over to the next. This loop here belongs to this shaft. Okay? So we'll go back again and we're going to find the other end. And then we're going to go back to the single crochet again. Go back and forth a couple times here so you can get used to this. Now, here's the loop that belongs to this shaft. This loop we just went to belongs to this shaft. So when we go through here, it belongs here, not to here. Remember that. The shaft that's in front of this is the one that you want because it belongs to this post. Okay? This loop belongs to this post. You can see it going around it. So we'll go through that one. And now you have a shaft that does not have a loop coming to it because it's your end. You haven't reached your end. You have a loop, you have a stitch for this shaft. You don't have a stitch for this one. So we're going to wrap and we're going to go through 2 strands of this second chain here. I think I'm going to go back into single, so I'm going to chain 1 and turn. And as you can see, we're doing pretty straight here. Okay. Now the single, remember, you go into the same stitch that belongs to this shaft, and that's the one right here. Okay. So now we have these 2 little miniature shafts, and this one stitch here is the one that belongs, whoops, sorry. We have these 2 miniature shafts, and we have this one stitch here that belongs to both of them, okay? Remember that for every single crochet row. Especially remember when you come to the end of a single crochet row and you're doing another type of stitch. Remember what you're dealing with. And because you're coming on a double crochet and you know that this stitch belongs to this shaft because it's the one that's coming to it, you know you have to come back here to the last shaft and make a stitch on it. See? See how we're going here? And if you can't, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, what happened? These 2 are the same stitch. These 2 both get into the same hole to begin with. These 2 count at once. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Or if you count the stitches on top, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? Now you don't want to use counting when you're doing something like a blanket with 200 stitches on it. So I'm going to go back to the double again. Chain 2 and turn. And I want to show you a little trick while I'm doing this. You see these big holes that the doubles leave on the edge? I do not like those big holes. And the way I count, there's a lot of different ways of countermanding them. One is to make this thicker by going into here, and another is what I like to do for a quickie is I go into the same stitch that I would if this was a single. I go into the first stitch, and that's my wrap. I go into the next stitch, then I bring through 2 and bring through 2, and I have a nice tight little stitch there. See that? No hole. No hole. See there? Now I did one thing wrong on that, which makes it a little low. I did it like I do a half double one. I wrap first for the double. Wrap first, go in, pull up a loop, go in, pull up a loop. Do that again. I wrap first, go into the first hole, which you're supposed to be skipping, go into the next hole, then I pull a loop through 3 loops and 1, and that gives me the height of the double, but gives me an extra thick stitch next to the end, but I avoid that big hole. When you go on down, you have a nice straight line and a nice straight side. And you don't have that darn hole in the end. Now, this is the single. So when we go in here, we have made our last stitch. This is a single crochet, which means these 2 here are your last stitch together. So for this, when you're going from a double into the single, you do not go to the side or your pattern's going to start going out that way and increasing. Okay? Remember, be aware of what you're doing on top of what. Because when you're doing on top of a single and you get to the end of the line, you know that those 2 shafts are the same stitch. They're one stitch. And the loop on top is the only stitch that you go into. Whereas a double, it's going to be the same going back, even though we did the wider stitch. And it actually makes it easier to find it too. I'm going to do that wide stitch again. Go through the hole I'm not supposed to go through. Go through the one I'm supposed to go through all 3, and then through 2. You don't have to do that. I like to do it because I really hate those holes in the side, especially if I go back and do a border around my work. Then you have really obvious big holes. Okay, now, this is double crochet, not single crochet. So this loop belongs to this shaft right here. So we go into it, and now we have the first, see the first loop? Here's the first stitch, the first chain. Here's the second chain. Remember the little slant lines I told you to look for? This is the chain you want to go into. And as you can see, it's right behind the one you just went into. So you stick in there and grab 2 strands of that and come up, and you're done. And you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stitches. Okay? So for all singles, you count the 2 at the end. That would be this end. You count the 2 at the end, the one that goes into the same stitch you just came up from. Those 2 count as 1. Only for single stitches. For double stitches, you don't do that. Up here, I just did like a gather stitch for my corners. The ends, I did a gather stitch actually between these 2 stitches to make this thicker and give me no hole on the end. See there? Down here, you got the hole. Up here, no hole. See? Instead of having these here, I've got these here. So, anyway, I hope that helped. If you have particular patterns that you have trouble with, give me a link to the pattern and tell me the specific problem you're having with it, and I'll do what I can to help you. Okay? All right, I hope that helps. Happy hooking, people.